So obviously the balance of risks posed by this, the continued labor unrest is negative for South Africa. It's affected growth already. We saw in the first quarter a contraction in real GDP. We will soon see whether that continued into the second quarter or if other factors will have offset the impact of the very long platinum sector strike. So going back to a strike format for the metal workers, which is, has of course started this week, is a fresh blow to the economy that could mean that South Africa will have once again a very subpar growth outturn in 2014.
Kristen, are you concerned about the strikes themselves or a lack of action, perhaps, that could prevent the strikes? And a lot of countries do recognize the rights of workers to embark on industrial action. So the next question would be, what action would you like to see?
Well, we don't advise anything that would not be appropriate for a rating agency. But one of the things that we have noted is that there are the labor framework agreement that was signed last year. First, it perhaps wasn't complete in some respects, in that it didn't manage to capture the signature of AMCU, the leaders of the strike, the platinum sector strike. And that omission, even though AMCU had been party to the negotiations, apparently their unwillingness to sign the actual agreement may have set the stage for this long strike. So perhaps a more universal coverage of the labor market agreement, of the labor framework agreement, would have been, might have avoided, or certainly could have been a vehicle for negotiating a shorter strike, perhaps with the same outcome, but certainly with not as dangerous or not as problematic for the economy at large.
You've raised concerns around the platinum strike, AMCU involved. The ramifications for Amplats in particular seem to be concerning you. Do you believe that the wage agreement in that sector that was reached, which brought that very long strike to an end, was perhaps unsustainable?
Well, I didn't mention anything specifically about Amplats in the release, but I know that it's been reported that way, but I'm not quite sure where that came from. It may have come from a different publication at Moody's from our corporate analysts. But certainly what we've seen is that the concession to above inflation wage increases in industries that were already, whose profitability was already very stretched, given the low prices that are now prevailing for platinum, mean that there could well be layoffs in store, and that I think is something that needed to be perhaps considered by the unions when they were pushing for those higher wages. Obviously, there's a lot of work to be done in the sector to restructure costs because of the current price level. And so the extra wage costs are certainly going to be a drag on that restructuring.
Kristen, when do you make the decision? When will we know? And my final question, is there any scope to consider that South Africa is one of the most unequal societies in the world? So we are seeing this intense strike action, but some people would argue that we do need a correction in this economy, which may be good for the economy going forward.
Well, obviously, South Africa is either the most unequal society in the world or the second. It hovers around there always. It's more unequal, according to the Gini coefficient, than it was at the time of the democratic transition, which I think is rather a startling statistic. That being said, these kinds of closing these kinds of gaps is easier said than done, as successive governments in South Africa have found out. There has been a substantial improvement in the living standards of the poorest segment of society, but that hasn't matched the increases in wages at the higher income levels. So you get this maintenance of very high inequities. And indeed, these kinds of inequities are exactly what leads to problems in government. And we have said right from the time we first rated the country that these socioeconomic conditions are one of the reasons why the rating will be constrained for the foreseeable future, because these are not issues that are easily resolved.
All right, we have to leave it there, and we appreciate your time. That was Kristen Lindo from Moody's on the line from New York.